You've eaten your vegetables, you've taken your walks, you've done everything you were told to do. And yet, your knees ache a little more than they used to. Your balance feels less steady than it did 5 years ago. Standing up from the couch takes a bit more effort. What if the problem was never how hard you were trying? What if the real cause is something almost nobody talks about? A quiet shift happening inside your muscles and joints that starts in your 40s and speeds up every decade after. On a small island in southern Japan, researchers have spent decades studying people who seem to sidestep this decline almost entirely. Okinawa has some of the highest concentrations of people living past 100 anywhere on Earth. And what keeps them moving isn't a supplement or a secret diet. It's woven into the rhythm of an ordinary day. Over the next 20 minutes, you'll hear about 9 everyday habits practiced across Japan that researchers believe help explain why so many people there stay strong and mobile well into their 90s. None of them require a gym. None of them cost much. And the first one might surprise you. Let's start with what's actually happening inside your body as you age. Somewhere around your 40s, your muscles begin losing a small amount of mass every year. Researchers who study aging call this process sarcopenia. It's not dramatic. You don't notice it happening in the moment, but left unchecked, it adds up, year after year, until ordinary things, opening a jar, climbing stairs, carrying groceries, start to feel harder than they used to. Here's the part most people get wrong. They assume this is just what getting older feels like, something to accept. But many researchers who study muscle aging believe inactivity, more than age itself, is what drives much of this decline. Muscle tissue works a lot like an engine that rarely gets started. It doesn't just sit there waiting patiently. Over time, it actually gets harder to start. This is where Japan does something differently. Since the 1920s, a short routine called Radio Taiso has been broadcast across the country every morning. It's about 3 minutes long. You'll see it done in schoolyards, in factory parking lots, and in community centers full of retirees, all moving through the same simple set of stretches and light calisthenics together. 3 minutes doesn't sound like much. But here's the surprising part. Consistency appears to matter more than intensity when it comes to preserving muscle as you age. A short burst of full body movement, done daily, keeps the signal going between your brain and your muscles. It tells your body this tissue is still needed. You don't need Radio Taiso specifically. What seems to matter is finding 3 to 5 minutes each morning to move every major muscle group gently before your day gets busy. Reaching overhead, rising from a chair a few times without using your hands, rolling your shoulders and ankles. It's a small action, but it's one your muscles seem to respond to. Now here's something most people never realize about long-lived Okinawans. It has less to do with what they eat, and more to do with when they stop. There's a saying still used before meals in Okinawa, Hara Hachi Bu. It means eating until you're about 80% full, not until your plate is empty. It sounds simple, maybe too simple to matter, but this eating pattern is one of the most closely documented habits among Okinawan elders, tracked for decades as part of the Okinawa Centenarian Study. To understand why it might matter, think of your metabolism like a backpack. A meal that leaves you slightly under full is like a backpack that's comfortably packed. Your body carries it easily. A meal that leaves you stuffed is like a backpack loaded past its limit. You can still walk, but every step now takes more effort, and your body works harder, quietly, for hours afterward, just to process what it's carrying. Researchers who study metabolism have noted that Consistently eating past the point of fullness may force the body's digestive and metabolic systems to work harder than they need to day after day. Over years, that extra strain is thought to contribute to the kind of low-grade wear that shows up later as fatigue, weight gain, or metabolic strain. Hara Hachi Bu isn't a diet. Nobody in Okinawa is counting calories at the table. It's simply a pause, a moment of noticing before reaching for more. And that pause is the second habit worth borrowing. Eating slowly enough to actually notice when you're comfortably, not completely, full. But diet and movement are only part of the picture. What Okinawan elders do with their afternoons, and who they spend them with, turns out to matter just as much. In Okinawa, there's a tradition that goes back centuries, long before anyone used the word longevity. It's called Moai. Originally, it referred to small groups of neighbors who pooled money together to support each other financially. Over generations, Moai became something more. A group of 5 or 6 friends, often formed in childhood, who commit to meeting regularly and supporting each other for the rest of their lives. Some Okinawan elders belong to a Moai that's been meeting weekly for over 80 years. 80 years of showing up for the same small group of people. Researchers who study social connection and aging have found something consistent across many populations. Chronic loneliness and social isolation are associated with health outcomes that some studies place on a similar scale to smoking or obesity. Being alone for long stretches appears to carry a real cost, even when it doesn't feel that way day to day. Think of your social circle like the roots of a tree. A tree with a wide, deep root system can withstand storms that would topple a tree standing alone. It isn't the trunk that determines whether the tree survives difficult weather. It's what's holding it steady underground, out of sight. Moai works because it isn't left to chance. It's scheduled. It's expected. Nobody has to wonder whether they'll see their friends this month, because the meeting is already on the calendar, the same way a doctor's appointment would be. You don't need a group that's been meeting for 80 years to start one. What researchers suggest matters most is regularity. One standing commitment, a weekly call, a recurring lunch, a walk with the same neighbor every Tuesday, appears to matter more than how many people show up. But showing up for others is only half the story. The other half is having a reason to show up for yourself. In Japanese, there's a word that doesn't translate neatly into English, Ikigai. Loosely, it means your reason for getting up in the morning. Not a job title. Not a retirement plan. Something smaller and more personal. Tending a garden, teaching a grandchild to fish, running a small shop 3 mornings a week. Here's what's interesting. In many parts of the world, retirement is treated as a finish line you cross and then rest. But in Okinawa, there often isn't a clean word for retirement in that sense at all. Elders in their 90s can often describe a clear, specific reason they get out of bed each day. Researchers studying purpose and aging have found a consistent pattern. People who report a strong sense of purpose tend to show better outcomes across a range of measures, including markers linked to cardiovascular health and cognitive function, compared with those who don't. The exact mechanism isn't fully settled, but one leading idea involves stress. A clear sense of purpose seems to buffer the body against the kind of chronic, low-grade stress that otherwise wears down the immune and cardiovascular systems over time. Think of purpose like a compass. It doesn't determine every step you take. But when you're uncertain, tired, or facing a hard day, it quietly points you in a direction anyway. Without it, people often drift. Not dramatically, just slowly, day by day, toward less movement, less connection, less reason to keep going. You likely don't need to search far for yours. Researchers who study this suggest Ikigai is rarely one big and dramatic purpose. It's often something ordinary. A skill you're good at, a person who needs you, a small task done well, repeated often. If something like that already exists in your life, this habit may already be working quietly in your favor. There's one more piece of the Okinawan day worth noticing, and it has nothing to do with exercise classes or gym visits. Many Okinawan towns were built long before cars were common. Markets, neighbors, and gardens are often close enough to reach on foot. So elders end up walking, not as a workout, but simply as a way of living the day, to the market, to a neighbor's house, to tend vegetables a short walk from home. This kind of incidental movement, the kind nobody schedules or tracks, adds up in ways structured exercise sometimes doesn't, mainly because it happens automatically, without requiring willpower on a tired day. That's 3 habits down. But there's still a Japanese approach to food and to rest that we haven't touched yet, and one of them might be the most overlooked habit on this entire list. Let's talk about what actually ends up on the table. Japanese meals are rarely built around one large portion of one thing. A traditional meal might include a small bowl of rice, a bowl of miso soup, a piece of fish, a few pickled vegetables, and maybe a small side of seaweed, all in modest portions, all different. For years, Japanese nutrition guidance encouraged eating roughly 30 different foods across a day. Researchers have since debated the exact number, but the underlying idea, deliberately rotating through many small ingredients rather than eating the same few staples on repeat, still shapes how many traditional meals are built. Miso, natto, and pickled vegetables in particular share something in common. They're fermented. And fermentation isn't just a flavor technique. It's a way of introducing live bacterial cultures into food before it ever reaches your plate. Researchers who study the gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your digestive system, have found that a more diverse microbiome is associated with a range of better health outcomes, including immune function and even mood regulation. Think of your gut like a garden. A garden planted with only one crop is fragile. One bad season, and everything fails at once. A garden with many different plants growing together tends to be far more resilient. Fermented foods appear to work a bit like adding new seeds to that garden. You don't need to overhaul your diet to try this. A small serving of miso soup, a spoonful of plain yogurt, or a few bites of sauerkraut or kimchi added a few times a week is enough to start introducing that variety. Now let's talk about something almost nobody associates with longevity: how Japanese households approach the end of the day. In many Japanese homes, taking a bath isn't about getting clean. Showering handles that beforehand. The bath itself, called Ofuro, is something closer to a nightly ritual, sitting in hot water, often up to the shoulders, for 10 or 15 minutes, usually in the evening, well before bed. Here's why that timing might matter more than it seems. Your body's core temperature naturally needs to drop in order to fall asleep. Researchers who study sleep have found that raising your body temperature deliberately, then allowing it to cool afterward, appears to speed up that natural drop. It's a bit like a light switch. You're not gradually dimming the room. You're briefly turning the brightness up so that when you switch it back down, the contrast makes the room feel darker, faster. A hot bath an hour or two before bed seems to trigger something similar in the body. Blood vessels near the skin widen to release heat, and as that heat dissipates over the following hour, core temperature drops faster than it would have otherwise, right around the time you're trying to fall asleep. You don't need a Japanese soaking tub to borrow this habit. A warm bath, or even a hot shower, timed an hour or so before bed, rather than right before you lie down, appears to offer a similar effect. It's a small shift in timing. But timing, it turns out, is most of what this habit is. There's one last habit worth mentioning, and it brings us back to where we started: your muscles and joints. Traditional Japanese homes are often built around low furniture, sitting at a low table on the floor, sleeping on a futon rather than a raised bed, which means multiple times a day, without ever thinking of it as exercise, people are lowering themselves to the floor and pushing themselves back up again. That single movement from standing to floor and back to standing turns out to be more revealing than most people realize. Researchers who study functional fitness in older adults have examined how easily someone can sit down on the floor and rise again without using their hands for support, and have found this ability tends to correlate with broader measures of strength, balance, and mobility later in life. It's not that sitting on the floor is magic. It's that repeating this one full body movement day after day without ever labeling it a workout keeps a skill in place that many people quietly lose simply because modern furniture never asks them to use it. You don't need to switch to floor furniture to try this. Even practicing lowering yourself to the floor and standing back up, slowly and safely, a few times a week, holding on to a countertop if needed, appears to help maintain that same ability. 8 habits in, 1 more to go. And it might be the simplest one of all. Let's end with the simplest habit on this list. One so small, it's easy to miss entirely. Throughout the day, in homes, offices, and tea houses across Japan, green tea is poured constantly. Not as a treat, not as a special occasion drink, just as the default beverage, sipped slowly, often several times a day. There's also something quieter happening underneath the habit itself. Pouring and sipping tea forces a small pause. A few minutes where your hands are busy with something calm and your attention slows down, even if just slightly. In a culture built around tea ceremonies, that pause was never accidental. Green tea contains a group of plant compounds called catechins, and researchers who study nutrition have spent decades investigating their effects on the body. Some studies have linked regular green tea consumption with better markers of cardiovascular health and cognitive function in older adults, though researchers are still working out exactly how much of that benefit comes from the tea itself, and how much comes from the habits that often surround it, like replacing sugary drinks or simply sitting down and pausing several times a day. Think of it less like a magic ingredient and more like a small deposit into a savings account. 1 cup won't change anything on its own, but a habit repeated 3 or 4 times a day, every day for decades, adds up to something the occasional supplement never quite matches. You don't need to overhaul your kitchen to try this. Swapping even 1 sugary or highly processed drink each day for a cup of green tea, and actually sitting down while you drink it, is a small, easy place to start. 9 habits. None of them require a gym membership, a strict diet, or a plane ticket to Japan. Moving your body for a few minutes each morning, before the day gets busy. Eating until comfortably full instead of completely full. Showing up for the same small group of people, on a schedule you don't have to think about. Having 1 small, ordinary reason to get out of bed. Walking through your day instead of driving past it. Adding a little more variety and a little more fermentation to your plate. Ending the day with warmth instead of rushing straight to sleep. Lowering yourself to the floor and rising back up on purpose every so often, just to keep that ability alive. And something as simple as a cup of tea poured slowly a few times a day. None of these habits are dramatic on their own. That might be exactly why they work. Longevity, at least in Okinawa, rarely looks like a single breakthrough. It looks like dozens of small, unremarkable choices. repeated so consistently that they quietly become the architecture of a longer, stronger life. If you take away just one thing from all 9, let it be this. You don't need to change everything at once. You just need one habit, practiced consistently, for long enough that it stops feeling like a habit and starts feeling like simply who you are. Pick one from this list. Try it this week. Let it become ordinary, the way it already is for someone, somewhere in Okinawa right now. If you found this helpful, please like the video, subscribe to Elder Nova for more science-backed healthy aging insights, and let me know in the comments which habit you're going to try first. I'll see you in the next video.